And one last thing I wanted to say is just because people just because people are moving like to America doesn't mean America's actually good. Um, and literally just ask Americans. Like the vast majority of Americans are deeply unhappy with the way things are right now. They're not. They're barely making ends meet. They're barely struggling to get by. They're barely getting by. If not, everything's collapsing even faster. We're descending even further into fascism. Prices are insane. Like I could. Oh my god! I made so many videos on this. I could go on and on and on. So people, and this goes back to that poll question, right? Where it's like, people have to be educated, man. Like, people think that coming to the West is going to be great, but holy shit, dude, you can ask all different kinds of people who were born here, who came here, that, like, things are not as good as they were made out to be. And so, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, Ty Lopez isn't even done speaking, and, like, I've already had to just, like, say all this stuff because what he's saying is such BS. And this is what happens when you justify the status quo. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. It's up to the dissenters and the people that are not in the status quo to literally move heaven and earth to prove everything that would be perfect under their alternative thing. Otherwise, what you're saying and doing is invalid. And that's going to be totally evident, power dynamic wise within the rest of this video as well. And I think that goes to show, and just another thing that I complain about as well, within leftists and communists specifically, my own comrades. Yeah, we're way too nice, man. Like, we are way too nice and accommodating and polite. And like, I mean, I guess that's kind of very much like my opinion, right? It's very much, it's good that we're doing that. However, there can be such a thing, moderation. All things in moderation, including moderation itself, right? Sometimes you do need to be a little bit of an asshole to get in there, to really dig deep. And I think sometimes in these discussions, everybody's just trying to like have their voice heard and be, have like a harmonious time that actual victory can be lost. And I know that sounds a little absurd because it's a social dynamic. Like, why am I, but that's what this is really about, right? This isn't just a discussion. This is praxis, right? Like, this is attempting to convert people. This video has, almost 1 million views now. What is that? Almost 6 months later soon? Yeah, soon. So 1 million, I mean, that's kind of low actually, but, and all different kinds of comments and stuff. So, it's important that we kind of look at these things and see what we can do better for next time, see what we need to improve upon. And sometimes, there's no shame in kind of like towing the line and make sure we stand our ground and not, be too open, too inviting, too empathetic to people, because they'll just take advantage of it if they're not acting in good faith. Okay, so that's enough for now.
So you legally cannot become Chinese. I went to international school growing up, and every single non-Asian or anyone else that's like American or Canadian that's gone to China has never wanted to come back to the US. That's something that's really...
Yeah, I mean, there it is, right? Like, I'm Christ, I didn't even know that. Actually, I mean, I think you have to like renounce the United States government, renounce your citizenship or something like that. And yes, I've also heard something similar to what she's saying, where all these people who did move to China from America do not want to come back, and they like it better, including like Chinese Americans, for example, who like came to America, like their parents or something brought them over, and then like they grew up and then went back to China, like back to their, roots or whatever the fuck. And, they realized like, oh wait, it is actually better in China. And so it's not like China doesn't have its problems. That's not the point. It's just that compared to the United States, like, it's no contest. And it's so funny because, it'll come up in this video as well, where it's like anything good that China does, it's because it's capitalist, and anything bad that China does is because it's communist. And that's just not how this works, man. To any comrades especially, including like Maoists, say whatever you want about, China. Like the Communist Party of China is in charge. It's the ruling party. It's been ruling for a long time. It has insane support. It has diverse thought. It has, I mean, like Deng Xiaoping's reforms, you could argue, were extremely successful. So it's just, there's all of these like little, unfairly judging, one side, and, not judging my side, fair, and letting myself off the hook type stuff. It's just all that typical, whatever you want to, yeah, you get my point.
Interesting. So I think it's like if you've never been,
That's an adverse selection, a group of people who are
Let her
already.
finish your point, and
Yeah.
then
like
we got you.
I guess like whoever has the open mind to go visit usually doesn't want to come back. And I do live streaming, so I know a lot of live streamers who like permanently move over to the like Asia, especially China, because not just it's cheaper, it's also just higher benefits. Most people get like free healthcare, so it's a lot easier for you to survive there. I think it's not because people don't want to go, it's also because you're taught propaganda since a young age. China's scary, China's bad, evil, red dragon, so people don't go and don't even go see it. That's the problem.
I would definitely argue.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't know if she brought, yeah, I don't know if she's like Chinese American. I don't think so. She's just a communist, right? Standing, I must have missed that. I can't remember what she said she was or not. But, like as you mentioned, right? Like if you just talk to Chinese people, they're like, yeah, man, like it's just better over there. In America, like the flashiness stuff of these car commercials of like, futurist stuff, and it's so very consumer tailored. Like it's vapid, man. It's empty. What's the point of having all this like flashy consumer stuff when we don't have free healthcare? When we pay for Israeli healthcare, we spend billions of dollars funding a genocide and all kinds of terrible wars and imperialism. We give bailouts to the corporations and the billionaires when their shit hits the fan, but then you never help working class people. There's all different types of laws being. I mean, it's kind of insane that anyone would defend America at this point, because if you're just even remotely paying attention, it's so obvious how bad things are going. Whereas, yeah, I mean, Bunny's just like straight. I mean, it's all irrefutable. It's not, because it's not just China, is it? It's also Vietnam. It's and I know these aren't like Japan and Singapore, for example, are capitalist countries, but there are still like it's developing in an entirely different context. Maybe not Japan. Japan's and South Korea is included as well. They're developed, and maybe okay. So China and Vietnam, right, as the two main, baddies, the two main, the big bads, the big bad boys of Asia, Eastern Asia. These places are thriving. Vietnam actually effectively eliminated homelessness a few years ago in response to the COVID pandemic breaking out, and you can find proof of that by checking out Luna Oi's channel. She's a Vietnamese communist who speaks fluent English, and she makes really great content that everyone, especially a Marxist, should check out. Very informative, very helpful, very. She shares a lot about like Vietnamese history and stuff like that, and that helps. Like if Americans saw this stuff, like yeah, it's like Bunny said, like the propaganda, like China, evil red dragon, right? Like, I mean, it's so funny because like it's like China evil, China so spooky, but then like what about all of the United States like terrible actions? Like, why isn't that included at all? Why isn't that known? Like, why don't Americans know that 20% of the North Korean population was eliminated in the Korean War? Why don't Americans know about, like, literally the millions of people that were affected by Agent Orange biologically and the thousands of children born with birth defects? I mean, like... And that's just China and Vietnam. Like, there's something very much... that needs to be addressed with this, and it's just ridiculous, the double standard.
That a lot of China's success is due to the introduction of free markets, but if we want to run with this idea that China is a socialist country, which is just fundamentally untrue, I could also just point to the fact that they're super low on the HDI. Their GDP per capita is like $12,000. The US GDP per capita is $70,000. So like I would say in terms of like economic success, we're definitely doing way.
Yeah, so we'll get to the HDI in a little bit. It's so funny because this is such a easy statistical error to make, if you actually understood economics, because the GDP is a mean. It's an average, which means that includes billionaires and millionaires. And so, the GDP is highly skewed towards the wealthy because it's not... they do not control, people who have, like, the small amount of people who have all the money compared to all of these people who have very little money. And another thing to consider is that the GDP, like, the standard, like, China can develop more with less. Hence, like, you might get paid less, for example, there, right? They might have, like, a lower flat value income compared to American dollars or something like that. But when it comes to, actually living standard wise, the living standard is higher. It is a higher quality of life, not just self-reported either, like across all lines. In Communist Party controlled nations, and specifically in China and Vietnam in this instance. So yeah, I mean, this is just it's just typical stuff where it's like looking up ways to see what kind of makes this true or not. And I mean, another thing, like if you wanted to use his argument and steelman it, right? Like let's say all that stuff is true. What about the trajectory, right? Because American trajectory is 100% going down, like irrefutably. Even the moments that we do actually incline or go up a little bit, there's no, it's so obvious the American economy is shrinking and getting more, the wealth gap is getting more strenuous. Whereas China's development graph is actually, it's almost like a straight line along the z-axis of development. And so, yeah, I mean, when he brings up this point about free markets, right, like, it's manipulation of language, because it's not even about the free, like, it's not a free market. It brought in foreign investment. It allowed capitalist bourgeoisie from other nations to come in and like allow investment, but it was all under the Communist Party of China's jurisdiction. There was no like, like the reforms will like let capitalists do whatever the hell they want. Like, no, man, like China's literally executing billionaires regularly. Same thing with Vietnam, like corrupt politicians, like, and that's how it should be done. So, interestingly, the Communist Party of China introducing foreign investment into China is not capitalism, it's fucking communism. Why? Because allowing capitalism to develop in China when China had not developed capitalism and had gone straight from feudalism to communism in the same way Russia did, that creates massive stressor of development on China. And you can see this with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's an amazing example. They basically tried to go full dick communism, and it it ended up not working, and that's not because communism didn't work. It's because Western influence and propaganda and media became so popular, and the selling image of it and marketing image of it, stuff like the Gorbachev in the grocery market with it being full and stuff like that, that they can basically sow the seeds of doubt in the Russian people, especially as the American and Western governments in general also try to seek to dominate the rest of the world and control markets and markets of oil in West Asia and the Middle East, control things like bananas, right, in Latin America. I mean, this is what so it's like, okay, dude, so it's like, yeah, dude, communism bad, but like capitalists can just like go and invade countries and try to get their shit because it's how the system works. Like, that's all just okay. And so this is what I'm talking about. There's a double standard here where if shit hits the fan, if there's a famine in China, it's Mao Zedong intentionally starved, and fucking killed a bunch of Chinese people. But like if FDR, liberal social darling, puts Japanese Americans in concentration camps, everybody's like, well, can't win them all, right? Like there's no point in acting like we can have these good faith discussions, because when you're class unconscious, you cannot possibly be good faith. So it's almost, like mandatory that you have to find not bad faith ways of arguing, but find ways that aren't just going to be, we're not talking to other comrades. We don't use logic and reason to like reach each other. There's a level of BS that has to be uncovered, dealt with, and directly attacked. And yeah, I mean, it's just typical stuff. We'll continue.
Better.
Ty, in terms of how we see immigration into this country, of course, we're American. We're only going to see the American viewpoints of this. China has immigration. People do try to cross to China's border all the time. We're all humans. Everybody's doing the same thing around the world. I would say what you're saying is a perspective issue. I would love to break it down even more and talk to you about the massive amounts of CIA missions that have gone through Latin America to destabilize those countries, but just at that point. To what you were saying, judging a country by how much the wealthiest people in their country profit in their company, we both know what GDP means.
Of course.
It's a bad faith way to really explain their country.
What about HDI? Human Development Index.
And how
so
is that
it's
made?
measured by things like health, income. It's the UN standard for like how well an economy is doing.
So from that point, perfect. Healthcare, we rank 37 in the United States. Cuba ranks 2.
Sure.
Oh God.
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you,
Hold on.
Wait.
Hold on.
Cuba
We gotta
ranks
take a step
what?
back.
Cuba ranks what?
Oh boy, the Cuban propaganda getting the Americans, the white Americans all cooked up, getting them already. Cuba? What'd you say about Cuba? As if Malumbo didn't literally just reference how, yes, Cuba is a Caribbean nation, but it's still within like the Latin American area, that the United States hasn't been conducting countless secret intelligence operations within Latin America, right? Cuba has been under probably the most oppressive blockade any nation has seen in world history, and they have still developed to where Malumbo's pointing out too. Cuba has the highest amount of doctors in the world. Cuba, even in the middle of the pandemic, was able to offer not just doctors and healthcare workers and healthcare equipment, but vaccines and resources, right? Like, Cuba is being blockaded and constantly harassed and undermined by the most powerful empire on earth, just trying to exist and doing its own thing, and it's still surviving on its own, doing its best. Like, the Communist Party is still in control. It's extremely popular. Yeah, there's moments of like reactionary uprising because BS is going on. I probably too would lose faith in communism if I was constantly getting blockaded by an insanely evil empire that's like, how do these people constantly have so much power? But you know, it just goes to show, right, where it's like the programming. Oh, Cuba, would you say? Like, you know, when you assess the fact that America has blockaded Cuba, and you're like, oh, they're so bad at developing communism, right? Like, that's not a shade towards communism. That's not a criticism of communism. It's a criticism of capitalism, because capitalism is so weak and fragile that some tiny ass fucking Latin American island nation of Cuba makes the United States government feel under threat. Vietnam, Grenada, North Korea, these things are making the United States feel under threat so they have to conduct these trillion massive weaponry, right, undercover operations, decades, and, you know, coups and all. Like, what is this, man? And so, you know, it just kind of goes to show, right? You know, Malumbo also brought up the points I brought up earlier. I forgot that he said that stuff, right? Where it's like, yeah, dude, GDP is like straight up tied to the wealthiest people in the country. That's not how that works. And I appreciate him trying to like gently like let down Ty Lopez and say it's like a perspective issue, because he's got the right idea. I like Malumbo's strategy the most. It's because it just gets to what's going on. You know, you can get too swept up in the intellectual stuff, the debate bro stuff of it. You know, this is, yeah, I don't know. I've had like conversations like this hundreds of times, man, and it goes the same way. It's the same stuff. It's the same, like, you know, rules and arguments and yeah. I mean, might as well diagnose it and break it down anyway. So.